far as I can tell, the oldest maps we have that show Scotland purport to have been drawn by the 2nd century Greco-Roman polymath Ptolemy. We have only copies of the World and Britain maps dating from the 15th century, the originals lost long ago. Scotland is shown skewed at 90 degrees to England, and not many place names make much sense, but we can just about get our bearings once we have identified the Clyde and Kintyre. The red names separated by dotted lines are the tribe names. If we swivel the map, the Forth and Moray Firths are now identifiable. Is that green oval Loch Ness? And can we see fishes swimming in it? This, in numerous versions, is also supposed to be a copy of Ptolemy's map. Maybe some further research is required, but meanwhile it does provide Latin names for places, some of which are recognisable. Just in passing, this 1513 version shows the Caledonian Forest in the west, well north of Dumfries, but also around St Andrews. Can anybody tell which the western fort is? C for Castrum, Novo is easy, Newcastle, but the other's name, which is indistinct, reads something like Castrum Vertuccio, but I can't identify it. It's not Carlisle, which was Luga Valium. Now to less archaic maps, beginning with John Leslie's of 1578. It's by no means the best, but it begins our story in the maps. One problem is that it's upside down. Now we can see Skye, with, to its north, what I think must be Lewis. We can recognise Lochalsh and the old Elandunnon Castle, so the castle on Skye must be Dunvegan, which we will see more competently depicted as we progress through the maps. Not all of the early maps are really informative, but mostly they improve on their predecessors in some of the detail. For several of them, we need to reorientate to interpret them. There are many Ortelius maps, this one appealing not so much for the information it provides, rather because of the whale. Even the less likely looking maps may provide nuggets of interest when compared with the others. Here, a name we recognise, Mercator of the familiar flattened world map projection. His geography of Scotland was perhaps a little rudimentary, but we can glean a little from it. Botero's map is crude, but having already seen them in older maps, we can detect symbols for two castles that we know, Elandunnon and Strome, so we can work out where Lochalsh is meant to be. John Speed was another well-known map maker, this marvellously accurate map providing inspiration to generations of York historians. Unfortunately, he paid less attention to Scotland, though again he shows our castles, as well as Dunvegan, rather strangely positioned, also what might be the little now ruined chapel at Kilchrist. Just out of the top of this picture, Speed has added an appealing picture of two galleons at war. Our ship is displaying the Cross of St George, while the one on the right has the old Spanish flag flying, so harking back to 1588. Now that we are into the 17th century, the maps become much more useful. Even Timothy Pont's scruffy drawing is packed with familiar names, now in English if archaic. Gordon's map seems to take much from Pont's drawing. It just needs to be swivelled a little. What do we make of all those little houses? Since they roughly match woodland on other maps, I think they must represent trees, but it's an odd way to show them. Here is the earliest map that actually shows the Plock of Kyle. It's not labelled as such and shows very few features, at least where it depicts the Plock. Only Kyle is shown as three little red rectangles, while all the way east from here, familiar places are named, surrounded by woodland, enclosures, and even showing lazy beds. Here the land around Ochtertyre and Nosty. I think we may presume that at the time the Plock was either uninhabited and unwooded or only briefly surveyed. I'll discuss that, comparing with other maps, later. Herman Moll and next Mark Tiddeman both show Lochalsh crudely and no Plock. Boswell's Diary, 1st September 1773. We passed through Glen Shiel, with prodigious mountains on each side. We came to a rich green valley, comparatively speaking, and stopped for a while to let our horses rest and eat grass. We soon afterwards came to Auchnarshiel, that's Shield Bridge now, a kind of rural village, a number of cottages being built together, as we saw all along the Highlands. We passed many miles this day without seeing a house, but only little summer huts called sheilings. We sat down on a green turf seat at the end of a house. We had a considerable circle about us, men, women and children, all Macraes. Not one of them could speak English. I observed to Dr. Johnson it was much the same as being with a tribe of Indians. Johnson: "Yes, sir, but not so terrifying." And then another crude map, this one by Murdoch Mackenzie, and it does seem to feature the Plock, well, sort of. Joseph Huddart was the first to show and label a Plock, but this is not the Plock of Kyle badly drawn, it's the Plock at Plockton. At least we now have the word Plock, and maybe there's just a hint of the Plock of Kyle. Does Dorrit show the Plock? It's difficult to say, so we move on rapidly. Ainslie seems to have copied from Huddart, but he's added roads. Here Colonel Roy's military road into and around Glenelg. But there seems to be no way of getting around Lochalsh, or Kintail as many of the map makers call it. This Thomson map is about as accurate as we get in the early 19th century. Places are named, roads are depicted, and the Plock is quite distinct if lacking its pladeg. It shows a building, a blob attached to the Y of Kyle, a hint of the presence of buildings clearly shown in an important 1807 estate map to be discussed shortly. This later Thomson map leaves us in no doubt of a building on the Plock. 5 years later, another Ainslie map improves on his previous, showing roads to and through Lochalsh, which were to be the main routes until the new rear egg to Kyle Road was installed in 1950, becoming the main route through Lochalsh to Skye, the A87. The first map to be truly accurate and detailed was the first 6-inch Ordnance Survey map of 1880. Here we see the true shape of the Plock, with croft buildings, a track to the main croft, now Plock Road and Heathmount Place, and indications of tree and gorse cover. This, plus the 1920 edition, is a rich source of historical and ecological information. We now hark back to 1807 for a beautiful map that surpasses all but the 6-inch OS maps for information, and its geography is much more accurate than others of the time. This estate map of Lochalsh and Glenelg estates resides at the Skye and Lochalsh Archive Centre and is huge, around 5 by 2 metres, needing to be unrolled on the floor for examination. The map shows all the settlements of the time, with the land divided according to croft boundaries, each numbered and its acreage provided. The estate map shows the Plock divided into 5 crofts, the largest of more than 52 acres. There are no other features shown apart from these 2 little rectangles. Are they houses? The 1880 OS map shows 2 similar features, but are they trees? Those houses, now shown as a single building, is here. So there were dwellings on the Plock in 1807, and more by 1880, which are still shown in the updated 1902 map. In 1880, the track led straight to what must have been the main croft buildings, but in 1902 had been diverted to another, the ruins of which can be found along the path north from the car park, just before you get to the Big Oak. There are still a few old trees on the Plock, and one of them, that oak, is adjacent to a croft building. I noticed on Mull years ago that abandoned farmsteads are often found with a tree or two beside them, perhaps retained to provide shade. The maps provide us with some evidence of ecological progress on the Plock. Were there trees there at the turn of the 19th century? None, it seems. Hypothesis. Apart from a few scattered mature oak and birch trees, during the 18th and early to mid-19th centuries, the Plock of Kyle lacked woodland, as it's depicted in the maps. A quick Google search has ascertained that during the mid-18th century clearances, people were evicted from the wealthy estates to low-value land, often on the coast. If the Plock was colonised during the clearances, When the 1807 crofts had become established, people would have needed to carry out subsistence farming, and it's likely that they would have freed up land by getting rid of the trees, maybe all of them except perhaps a few retained beside buildings. It is obvious that the Plock will support trees. A few old ones still survive, while downy birch and rowan grow vigorously in many places. If the trees were cleared away, they had begun recolonising by the later 19th century and continue to do so. Crofting today. The earliest map showing the Plock of Kyle shows no trees, while trees are conspicuous towards the east. The same is illustrated by the 1807 estate map, emphasised by the absence of trees on another Plock in the region, that at Plockton. Interestingly, in the 1750 map, the Plockton Plock is not only devoid of trees, but it appears to have been given over to lazy bed cultivation, which the Plock of Kyle was not. However, lazy beds were plentiful a short distance inland, so we might consider that the Plock was not only treeless, but also uninhabited until the clearances during the second half of the 18th century. Now, referring to 17th century maps, I think we may presume that Pont's little symbols, which roughly match tree distribution in Lochalsh, are indeed trees. If so, the Plock of Plockton is shown as treeless, and maybe the Kyle region too, though it is rather obscure. Actually, a mess. If the little houses in Gordon's map, which was based on Pont's, are in fact tree symbols, it would be rash to opine that the Plock at Plockton was treeless, even less so the Plock of Kyle, but the pattern might be considered to match the other maps. What can we glean from the maps about woodland development on the Plock? The 1750 Roy map shows none, while to the east of Kyle, woodland is frequently depicted. The same comparison applies with the 1807 map, so I think we might presume that the Plock was indeed treeless. By 1880 a fringe of woodland had developed by the northern shore, plus scattered trees inland. The same map shows patches of firs, which today we call whin or gorse, a common ecological response to relaxed land management. By 1902 the woodland cover had increased, and the gorse too, indicating that crofting was less intensive than it had been. This summary shows the progress of woodland left and gorse right, 1880 above and 1902 below. And here, roughly as they are today. Gorse thrives when previously managed land is abandoned. As it ages, trees already growing in its shade emerge, overtop the gorse, outcompeting it, and eventually the trees become woodland. In places, the woodland floor is littered with the remains of the gorse, which grew there only a few decades ago, killed by the trees. Here is the ecological process, from solid gorse with little trees and many other woodland plants already present below, via the trees growing out and suppressing the gorse until woodland has become established. There are two good places for viewing the Plock, from the Skye Bridge and from the high viewpoint. First we'll examine the patch by the bridge, which when I began watching in 2006 was just dense gorse with no trees. It changed. By 2011, a few trees had emerged from the dense canopy. Back in 2006, the gorse had been short, dense and impenetrable, yet there will have been many plants growing in its shade. When actually getting in 2015, we recorded a surprising 163 plant species. Under the gorse, lots of little birch and rowan saplings survive in the gloom until the gorse ages and begins to sag and open up. Then they can emerge and grow as trees. Compare the states of the gorse and its trees over this 20-year period. Seen from the bridge, left, and from the viewpoint, from gorse monoculture to beginnings of woodland in just 20 years. This is the oldest photo of the Plock that I've found so far, and it shows sparse trees to the north, a few small trees centre, and a couple of recognisable trees in the foreground. The shrubby growth in the foreground and elsewhere is surely gorse, but not much of it. A lot of ground now under woodland or gorse, other than the meadow, is just bare rock. Tree cover had increased by 1967, but is still very sparse when compared with the 21st century landscape, emphasised when the gorse is in flower. Quite a change, I think you'll agree. Both trees and gorse have spread dramatically over the past half-century. There's a lot of bare rock showing in the old photos, particularly since it was the time of golfing activity and Kyle pharmacist Duncan Macpherson's photography in the vicinity of the golf course clubhouse during the 30s. This rock by the clubhouse, now buried in gorse, was clear for people to sit on. There is so little vegetation in this picture when compared with today. Maintaining the golf course must have required a lot of land management, which when it ceased will have been followed by gorse. In 2014 that gorse was cut down, a perfect demonstration of how not to control gorse. No further action necessary for complete control was taken, and within a few months new sprouts appeared and thousands of seeds waiting in the soil to be stimulated to growth by light germinated. Back to gorse as usual, if not denser. Please visit the Skye and Lochalsh Environment Forum's YouTube channel for a full treatment of the gorse topic. Link in the text below. That was just a sample from what we know about the remarkable Plock of Kyle. We hope to discover a lot more in a community citizen science project launched in June 2025 by researchers from the James Hutton Institute for Land Use Research in association with the Kyle of Lochalsh Community Trust.